Well, greetings and welcome to another episode of Lightbulb Moments. This is episode number 182. And I am Tom Kuhn. I'm the host and curator of Lightbulb Moments. Lightbulb Moment is a sudden realization, enlightenment, or inspiration, and we certainly hope in this forum that you get some lightbulb moments today. Lightbulb Moments is brought to you by Qnity. Go to qnity.com for more information about projects we're working on and how we'll support you in your business going forward. We'd also like to give a shout out to some of our sponsors, including Lightheart Sanders and Zenoti. Thanks to both of those companies for making this forum possible. Today, we have a special guest today, and his name is Raj. Raj, I will allow you to pronounce your full name if you will please do that.
Yes, it's Raj Raghunathan.
All right, well, welcome. Raj, I mentioned to you, we're down here for my month in Austin. And one of the reasons that my wife and I come down here to be in Austin the month of March is not just to get away from the Minnesota weather, but also to really reinforce a great partnership that we have with the University of Texas, help prepare for the Phil, as well as be inspired by the great community of Austin. So thanks for being our guest.
You mean host? Oh,
Guest.
actually, a guest here on the podcast. Okay.
All good, man.
Because I
All
live in
good.
Austin, and so I also feel like I'm partly playing host to you and your wife when you're down here in March. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the podcast. I am really looking forward to this.
So not only are you a guest on your podcast, but you are actually joining us at the Phil, our upcoming event in May,
Hmm.
May 19th through 21st. So you're going to be one of our featured guests and one of our featured professors. And so this is a great opportunity for me to get to know you, our audience to get to know you, and to celebrate our excitement and gratitude for you being part of our big event coming up.
Right. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to it.
So, a little bit about you. I took some notes here. So, you're a world-renowned well-being expert. Your book, I love this title of the book, and I just want to dig into it. If you're so smart, why aren't you happy? What a
That's right.
great title for the book. We're going to come back to that. You also have a TED Talk. You also have a Psychology Today blog. You've got some award-winning courses. You have practical strategies to enhance personal satisfaction, more meaningful connections with your team and clients and beyond. What a great body of work that you've created. So,
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. And I feel extremely grateful to have been given the opportunity to do all of that. As you know, it's one thing to have a passion and a vision and a set of goals, and another thing altogether to be able to check them off and achieve them. And I've been extremely grateful and lucky, really, to have been able to do that. The universe has been very kind.
tell me about your book. Like I said, it's a very compelling, it just creates such curiosity. Talk to me about the book a little bit. In the interest of full disclosure, I have not read it yet, okay? But I will read it. So,
Sure, yeah. So it's a very provocative title. If you're so smart, why aren't you happy? And it is targeting, as you can imagine from the title, it's targeting people who are smart, who are successful, who've achieved a lot. Kind of the people that I interact with. I'm in the business school, as you know, a marketing professor. So a lot of my students, a lot of my colleagues, a lot of the people that I interact with in the business world are smart and successful, but may not necessarily be as happy or be leading a life that's as fulfilling and meaningful as they would like or as they should be or could be. And so I explore some of the reasons why people fall short of how happy they could or should be in the book. And I talk about seven different kinds of quote unquote sins, I call them. But really, I mean, I don't mean any moral or ethical or religious transgression. I just mean a mistake people make. And sometimes these mistakes, the mistakes in the book are mistakes that people commit, are more likely to commit if they're smarter or more successful. And so some of the very, very things that probably help us in making us more successful can, if we don't watch out, come in the way of our happiness. And so That's what I talk about in the book.
Tell me more. Tell me more
Sure.
about some of these
Yeah, so I'll give you a
seven.
couple of examples. So one of the things that a lot of smart people are known for is that they are kind of go-getters, and particularly the successful people are go-getters, achievement-oriented people who tend, because they are so achievement-oriented and want to be successful, tend to engage in social comparisons and, in particular, chasing superiority. They want to be the best. They want to be known as the best. They want to kind of compare their performance with that of the elite performers in their field and things like that. And it turns out that that is not very, very good for happiness, as you can imagine. It leads to, in the moments that you kind of fall short, a lot of insecurity, maybe even jealousy or envy, certainly a lot of heartburn and negative emotions. And even in the moments that you do succeed, you tend to experience a kind of a hubristic or ego centric set of positive emotions like pride. Okay, and as the saying goes, pride comes before a fall. And there is research kind of showing that that's in fact true. That if you experience a lot of pride, chances are high that you're actually going to experience a low as well. And I can go into some of the reasons for it, but that would be one example. Another example would be that people who are really driven, smart, successful, etc., tend to deprioritize their relationships. They want juicy and challenging projects, and they probably get invited to kind of take a lead role in achieving those projects. And as a result, something's got to give, and it turns out that it typically is relationships. So they tend to be out on work a lot and deprioritize maybe their family, and even if they are able to kind of uh, to spend time with the family and prioritize the family, they end up sacrificing their relationships. And this is one of the statistics that's actually very important for us to remember here, Tom. And you're a middle-aged man, and so am I. It turns out that men are particularly in danger of deprioritizing their relationships and discovering kind of, somewhat latish in their life that they feel lonely. They've kind of burned their bridges when it comes to friendships. And perhaps the kids have, graduated from home and gone on to colleges or beyond. And in the unfortunate cases where there is a divorce in the family, the men are the ones that suffer more. And the women tend to kind of still nurture and continue to invest in their friendships and relationships, but men in particular are in danger of feeling really lonely after, say, 50, 55 years of age. So that's another big mistake that people who are smart and successful could make, that they deprioritize relationships. And I talk about five more things like these, and I'm happy to kind of continue to talk, but I want to pause a little bit and see if you have any comments, questions, reflections.
I'd
So,
love to hear more because I want to go back to your statement about pride.
mhm.
You gave a quote. It was pride happens before a fault,
Fall.
did you say?
Fall. Pride
Oh,
comes before a fall. Yeah,
ah,
like literally falling down, fall. It's an English saying, and I'm originally from India, and as you know, we were ruled by the British for 350 years, and so there's a lot of English sayings that are very popular and prevalent in India that I discover when I come to America that Americans have not heard of this. This might be one of those.
gotcha. Okay. So then unpack some more. I'm super curious to have you just continue. So,
Okay, all right. Yeah, a third kind of quote unquote sin that a lot of smart and successful people commit is that they become overly control seeking. As you can imagine, if you're really successful at what you do, you're very good at achieving the organization's goals, increasing its profits, market share, whatever those yardsticks are. So you're given more resources, you're given a bigger team to lead, you're given more money and challenges, and so on and so forth. And if you're not watchful, what we discover is that people can get kind of intoxicated by control and being given control and being given resources, and therefore want even more control and even more resources, and even more the sense that I want to be in the driver's seat. I want people to obey me. I want people to behave in the fashion that I think is appropriate. And I want outcomes that I think are desirable to happen to me more frequently, and so on. And so this, sin, I call it being overly control seeking. And this is manifested as a desire to control other people and for them to behave in the fashion that you as the leader think is appropriate or fit or desirable. And you also want to control outcomes. You want to have a certain kind of a dinner or the evening to unfold a certain way. If you're throwing a party at home, you want people to behave in the party a certain way or the food to be presented in a certain way and for the evening to kind of unfold in a certain fashion. So, um, as we know, life is difficult to control, right? Who knows what's in store for us? Who could have predicted COVID, right? Who could have predicted these wild swings in the stock market? Maybe we could have predicted that. I don't know. But, so it's very difficult to predict exactly how things are going to unfold, particularly things that are a little complex and kind of a little more farther away in the future than something that's immediate. And so if you tether your happiness to things working out exactly the way that you want them to work out, you're actually setting yourself up more for misery and frustration than you're for happiness. So that's another kind of mistake or sin that people who are smart and successful are most prone to committing. And not to say that people who are not so smart or not so successful are not likely to also commit some of these sins. They are too, but it just seems that people who are smart and successful are just a little bit more likely to commit these kinds of sins. Then I go on to talk about two that involve trust. One of them is trusting people, and the other is trusting life. So let me just kind of like unpack each of these. So trusting people, the sin is to distrust people. And so people who are very smart and very successful, maybe particularly very kind of like, think through uh, their interactions with people almost as if it were a game of chess, so they can kind of like foresee what it is that somebody else might do if they said something or did something, and then factor that in the decision that they're about to make, almost like a game theoretic approach to life, where every interaction is seen strategically and with the aim of maximizing your utility or your profits or your welfare, etc. And if you're really smart, you might be very good at that, right? You might be able to outthink somebody else and be a couple of steps ahead of them. And that in turn could lead you to kind of like, be a little more vigilant of what it is that other people are up to and be a little bit distrusting of them. Because in your quest to achieve your outcomes, you might want to outthink them. And it turns out that that's not very good for happiness. It turns out that one of the kind of, best metrics for how chilled out you are and how well you sleep is how much you trust people, particularly the people with whom you have routine interactions. Your spouse, your good friends, your neighbors, whoever it is that your colleagues with whom you have your routine interactions. You need to really feel this sense that, what, these people have my back, rather than feeling that, hey, they're going to watch out for their own outcomes, and they're going to be, more self-centered than altruistic. And so I better kind of like protect myself first, right? And I better be vigilant. And it turns out that's not very good for happiness. And the really interesting kind of finding in this realm is that people, on average, okay, people are more trustworthy than we give them credit. And there are lots of studies on this. And one of the most interesting studies is this so-called wallet drop experiment, in which 20 wallets with $200, this was done up in Canada and Toronto, but it's been replicated subsequently in other cities around the world. But 20 wallets with approximately 200 Canadian dollars, actually exactly 200 Canadian dollars, were dropped in the city of Toronto. And there was a license, driver's license inside the wallet with an address and with a purported owner. It turned out that the owner wasn't actually the true owner of these wallets. It was actually an experiment that was being conducted by the Toronto Star newspaper up there. And so it is a fictitious name, etc. But to the person who found the wallet, they wouldn't know this. And the question was, how many of these wallets would get returned, right? And so after they dropped these wallets, 20 wallets, in various parts of Toronto, one was dropped in a park, another in the train or the metro rail, third one near a church, and so on and so forth. They waited for a month to see how many of these wallets would get returned with all the money intact in it. And what they found is that when people were asked this question, supposing 20 wallets got dropped with $200 in each wallet, how many would get returned? out of the 20, on average, people guessed 4.5 wallets, 4.6 wallets to be precise, would get returned. So people's perceived levels of trust in their fellow uh, Toronto citizens was 23%. But in fact, 80% of the wallets got returned. 16 of those 20 wallets got returned. And so there's a big, huge yawning gap between people's actual levels of trustworthiness and people's perceived levels of trustworthiness, right? And so to the extent that it's the perceived level of trustworthiness that gives you good quality sleep and makes you feel relaxed and chill because you feel like everyone has your back, people are unnecessarily making themselves unhappier. All they need to do in order to be happy is to be more well calibrated and be more trusting of their fellow citizens. So it's a very interesting finding. So that's with regard to trusting others. And you can kind of extend this topic of trust to trusting the universe, right? Do you trust life? Do you trust that good things are going to happen to you? That even if something is a negative thing, a negative event, maybe you missed a flight, right? Or maybe you broke a bone. Maybe you're feeling a little bit sick, or maybe a presentation did not go well, right? Or maybe you open your wallet and you don't see $10 that you expected to find in it. So when these negative things happen, where does your kind of mind go? Does it go to, oh, poor me, I always kind of suffer all these things and nothing ever good happens to me? And you're kind of like vigilant, and not so much with regard to other people, but with regard to life itself, right? Or does your mind go to, you know what? These kinds of things have happened to me before, and in the end, it all works out. And even if it might seem like a negative thing right now, if I just wait it out, there's some lesson in it for me. Okay. And at the end of it, I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to be a more kinder person, or a more skilled person, or something. Some good is going to come out of every event in my life, including the bad events. So I call this attitude trusting life. You might call it a spiritual attitude. It is a little bit easier to have this implicit trust that everything is going to work out if you believe in a loving God, right? But as I say, you don't have to be religious. You just need to be spiritual, right? You just need to have this sense that things work out for me. And we've actually done some research on this, and a paper came out last year, 2024, on this. And what we do in the studies is we ask people to recall past events that were negative, and then also, have the participants recall past events that were positive, and then we ask them to think about how they feel about those very events now. And it turns out that the intensity with which we feel negative about past negative events drops significantly with the passage of time. We no longer feel as intensely negative as we did about, let's say, even a thing like a divorce. Like a couple of years have passed since the divorce, we feel like, you know what? It's actually a good thing that that breakup happened, right? Or it might be even like big events like a house burning down or losing a job. Certainly for relatively smaller negative events, people might even start to view them a little bit favorably now, And there's a funny side to the fact that I felt sick when I went to this vacation in Spain. I was going to go out and hang out and do, I don't know, windsurfing and all that. And I was just like so sick, I was throwing up. But now it's a story, that I can tell other people about what happened. So what we do in the study is we ask people to recall past events that were negative or positive, and then how they feel about it now. And then we discover that there's almost always a significant drop off in negativity when it comes to past negative events rather than positive events. And so what we then do is we ask people to recall another set of participants. We ask them to recall a current negative event, and we tell them that, look, we have found that when people are asked to recall a past negative event, the feelings of intensity drop off significantly. And we just remind them that the same thing might happen to the current negative event that they're experiencing right now. And just that one little small kind of recognition that, you know what, if I were to fast forward a couple of months, certainly a couple of years, but even a couple of months in the future, I don't think I'm going to feel this is not going to be that. This is not going to be ruling my life, the fact that I missed a class or I got a bad grade or whatever it is, right? And so we find that this is a good way in which to kind of gain a little bit of perspective on life, and also kind of gain a little bit of trust in life. Good things are going to happen to me. In the end, everything's going to work out. That kind of an attitude. So you end up trusting life more. And I'm happy to talk about another really good kind of exercise that people can do in order to gain trust in life. I'll just talk about these last two that remain very quickly, these sins that I talk about in the book, and then I'll see if you have any questions or reflections, Tom. So the sixth one that we talk about in the book is what we call mind addiction. And this is certainly something that people who are really smart are most likely to be susceptible to. It's almost like by definition, something that smart people do, which is that they think a lot, right? And one of the kind of assumptions that a lot of smart people have is that I will arrive at a better solution to whatever problem that I'm experiencing right now if I just think a little more about it. If I just kind of like, engage in some more deliberation and kind of conscious thinking and all that. And it turns out that a lot of times that might be true that, if you were to think about a problem, give it a second thought, etc., you might come up with better solutions. But there are a lot of contexts and domains in which thought enough. More thinking is actually going to lead to more rumination and more heightening of negative emotions rather than being able to come up with a better solution to the problem. And so sometimes you just have to not think that much. And so it's nice to have the ability to shut your mind off, to be able to kind of like slow down your thinking at the very least, if not, stop thinking altogether. And so, I present the kind of antidote to the sin as mindfulness, and the practice of mindfulness becomes very important. By the way, I haven't really talked about the antidotes to the other things that I talked about earlier, including chasing superiority or deprioritizing relationships or being overly control seeking. And I can talk a little bit about the antidotes to those in a bit. But to this mind addiction, as we call it, the antidote is practicing mindfulness. As you can imagine, if you were to kind of like practice the ability to watch your thoughts and reconnect with the sensation, maybe your breathing, maybe just a body scan, basically experiencing life through your sensory appetite, so to speak, rather than through your mind. It really gives you the ability to regulate your thoughts, So it's not that you would stop thinking altogether, but you can choose how much and when to think rather than that being out of your control, right? And that being a reflexive reaction to a challenging situation. Okay, so I've talked about six different kinds of quote unquote sins. And the final one is the one that I actually start the book with, but you can think of it as the final one as well, is this sin of deprioritizing happiness. So we have lots of different goals in life. And if you ask, stop people and ask them, how important is the goal of being happy, right? How important is it for you to lead a positive, emotionally positive, uplifting, fulfilling, meaningful life? I think most people around the world would say that's very, very, very important to me. Maybe the top goal. Everything that I do is like in part because I want to feel good. I want to feel that this was a meaningful thing to do. This was a good thing to do. So it's a very important goal. But then as you observe people going about their life, what me and my colleagues find is that oftentimes they sacrifice happiness for other things that they themselves would acknowledge are not as important as happiness. So they might want to be right in an argument. The ego comes in the way, right? And so they are sacrificing happiness for the sake of being right, for example, right? Or they might sacrifice happiness for the sake of getting more value for money, or prestige, or status, or fame, and so on. And so, and the idea here is to kind of like recognize that ultimately what deeply, truly, eventually matters a lot, if not the most, is to lead a fulfilling, happy life. And just kind of use that as a little bit of a kind of like check in with yourself particularly before you make important decisions, but even in general, just to be aware that, look, I mean, ultimately, all of this is good, but what truly deeply matters is my happiness. And to the extent that we're highly social as a species and relationships matter, it's the happiness of those around us, particularly those we care for and are important to us. And so just kind of like, recognizing that gives you a sense of direction and clarity on what decisions to make. So that's what is the seventh quote unquote sin. So I'll just stop there. I've been talking for a while, and you've been very kind and nodding and giving me a lot of positive nonverbal feedback.
Well, This is phenomenal. And I find myself becoming inspired, and I also find myself becoming thoughtful and mindful and just being present with you and putting myself into the shoes of the person that you're describing. So all of them resonate to me, and the trust piece I think is super interesting, and the again and again we have seen that a negative circumstance has this massive silver lining to it. So I love just that very simple exercise of saying, revisit something in the past that was perceived to be negative, look at it today. How do you feel about it today? And then using that as an impetus for something in the present moment. That is a really simple and powerful exercise, right?
100%. Yeah, we call it recognizing growth potential from whatever events are going on right now. It's called RGP in the paper as an acronym. But yes, yeah. Mm,
Recognizing growth potential. I'm writing that one down, and you even have an acronym for that one. Okay,
yeah,
excellent.
exactly. And the really, to me, a very interesting thing about that is that it comes relatively naturally to people who are kind of religious and go to church, for example, or go to a temple and contemplate or engage in prayer. It's almost a quality that they believe is a primary feature of a God, particularly a kind and loving God, right? That they're going to take care of you, and so don't worry, things are going to work out. And what the RGP strategy offers is that even if you're atheistic, right, even if you're agnostic, um, just the intellectual kind of exercise of reminding yourself that past negative events seem to have a silver lining. If not, actually, the past negative event was the silver cloud, even, right? And you just were focused on the dark lining when it happened. But in retrospect, when you look at it, it actually was exactly what you needed at that time. And you're so grateful that that happened. It offers an avenue for even the people who are otherwise, not prone to kind of being okay with religious or what seems like unscientific beliefs. It gives them an opening to gain faith in the kind of idea that even negative events can weave positive consequences in the future.
Well, I'm thinking ahead to the Phil and
Hmm.
our conference, and the idea behind the Phil is to fill the gaps in your business, but
Hmm.
also fill your bucket by getting away. And we have a lot of small business owners and leaders that will be joining us in Austin. So you have a workshop, and I know that you keep your workshops interactive, engaging. Do you want to give us a sneak peek of some of the things you might be covering in your workshop?
Yeah, I actually I'm very thrilled to be doing that with you all. And there are a couple of things that could happen in the workshop, and I'd actually like maybe your feedback, and we could do it now or we could do it after this episode is over. On which of these do you think would be the most attractive to the people out there? So, broadly speaking, the workshops that I conduct are fall into two kind of like categories. One is more personal happiness kind of category, and the other one is a more professional or work-related context. And let me talk about something that I was thinking of doing in the work-related context. Is what I was thinking I would do is to offer a kind of a framework for enhancing the happiness of your coworkers or one's coworkers, and in particular direct reports if you're a leader in the position in a leadership position, and offer a framework. It's called the Bamba framework, and I'm happy to talk about what the Bamba framework is, but then end with this simulation that I've recently kind of co-created with a company in India. The company's name is Knowlescape. And what the simulation does is it allows you as a leader to take decisions on behalf of your teammates or your coworkers. And so basically, you're considering how best to enhance the well-being and the happiness of your team. And you're given an opportunity to kind of like consider a menu of different actions you can take, and then you have to use judgment to pick one or more of these. And each of these is going to come at some cost, either in terms of time or in terms of budget or money. And so it's realistic in that sense. And then you take this decision, and then you wait to see what the consequences are. And sometimes people are somewhat unpleasantly surprised that, hey, I took this in good faith, this action, and it turns out that it actually, far from improving people's happiness, is lowering people's happiness. And then, you get into some of the research on why it is that that was not a very good action given the context and the circumstances. And you learn that, intentions could be good, but then, the outcome may not be aligned with the intentions. So that's one broad approach. And the other broad approach is, like I said, personal life happiness. And there, I typically tend to kind of spend, the workshop, the amount of time that we have on a specific aspect that most people, would acknowledge is very important. And of course, research has found it to be very important too, which is relationships. And relationships can be of different types. Perhaps a very interesting one that's of interest to most people is romantic relationships, but it could also be relationships with your friends and with other family members, not necessarily your spouse. And it could also obviously be relationships in the work context with your colleagues, etc. So I just talk a little bit about what do we know about the importance of relationships, what do we know about what tends to nurture these relationships, and what are some of the kind of like surprising insights that come from the research on how to kind of maximize the amount of happiness that you can not just garner for yourself, but also give other people in the context of relationships. So those are some of the things that we could potentially do.
Yeah, I think that both of them sound very powerful. I'm probably drawn more to the work relationships.
Yeah,
And you mentioned simulation, so there's a little bit of a gamification to this, actually. Is
exactly.
that right?
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Well, we will keep our audience very intrigued and waiting with bated breath to see what we come up with. But no doubt, our guests are going to get a ton out of this. I'm very reflective in this conversation with you, to be honest with you, and it certainly causes you to look inside. I think that you say smart people. I think everybody's smart. We're all smart, just on different subjects, right? And I don't consider myself to be an exceptionally smart person, but I'm smart in the universe that I'm smart in. And but happiness is something we don't talk about very much, and there's so much negativity. There's so many things that just prevent you from happiness, and it becomes so habitual, doesn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, you can very easily get into a bit of a rut and deprioritize your happiness, and then that becomes a quote unquote habit. So, for example, you might be in a relationship in which there is a baggage of past interactions, and what in the research is sometimes called codependence, and you behave in a certain fashion in reaction to your partner's not so productive kind of responses or behaviors or words, and you might even recognize that this is not a good thing for the relationship and for your happiness or for the other person's happiness, but it just continues on that way. And there are other examples in other domains as well that we continue on. And one of the kind of uh, theoretically not so interesting but very very important one is just the lack of self-control and self-regulation, right? And we know what's good for us in terms of lifestyle, what it is that we should be eating and not eating, and in terms of exercising and in terms of sleep. And yet we might, in the moment, kind of, choose the thing that's the wrong thing. And at the same time, be optimistic about making a different choice in the future, which is a very interesting phenomenon, where it seems like the self-control is only lack of self-control is only for now, but in the future it's going to change. Yeah, but I 100% agree with you that happiness is very important. And actually, I start my book with this question that's called the genie question that exactly captures what you said, which is that I ask people to imagine there's a genie, similar to the one in Aladdin's story, that appears in front of you and offers you three wishes. What three wishes would you make, right? And people rarely around the world, I've kind of like asked this genie question to over 10,000 people around the world, rarely list happiness as one of the things that they would ask for. They ask for money, they ask for, great relationships, they ask for success and good health and so on and so forth. But rarely do they ask for happiness or, things that are related to happiness, like a fulfilling life or a meaningful life. And when I ask people why they did not ask for happiness, they say, well, I asked for the things that would lead to happiness. And so, it's kind of like assumed that I asked for happiness. But I then, kind of like actually don't let them off that easily. I ask them, okay, if you truly want happiness, why ask for the means to happiness? It's like saying, you know what, I want to take a flight from New York to Delhi, but I'm going to ask for a flight to London. Why? You want to reach Delhi, ask for Delhi. Why do you want to ask for the means to happiness? If you're so convinced that all of these things are definitely going to lead to happiness, right? Then it's fine. But you have to acknowledge that you can't be 100% sure that more money is going to make you happier or, great health is going to make you happier. There might be other things that are in fact more important. And if you ask for happiness, not only are you automatically asking for all of these things, if you're so convinced that they're going to lead you to happiness, you're also probably then making sure that some other things that you didn't put on your list are going to be covered by the genie, right? Because the genie has to, it's all powerful and all knowing, and so it has to deliver on its promise. And so you're actually better off asking for the thing that you really want. And then they scratch their heads and they're not sure, oh yeah, you kind of make sense, but I don't know, I just feel uneasy asking for happiness. It just seems like this thing that I don't know exactly what to define it as, and so on. Um, and then I do the genie question a different way to, some set of participants. I ask them, here's this genie, can grant you any wish. Remember, you can ask for anything from the genie, including some of your most important goals. And, just so you know, some of the goals that people have listed as more important, very important, is happiness, right? Then all of a sudden, a vast majority of people end up asking for happiness or some form of. So what that tells me is that people actually think happiness is very important, but as they're going about their life, they just forget happiness is important. They just like other things take over. They take like more kind of occupy your visual field of what's front and center in terms of your goals, like making money, like fame, like health, like relationships. And so we kind of ask for these things because they're more salient to us. So to your point, happiness is important, but we deprioritize it. We do other things, and we just go about our life, having acquired a bunch of habits and reflexes that, when you look at it kind of closely, there's an interesting thing that you recognize, which is that we seem to be sacrificing happiness all the time.
I have a lot of light bulb moments, and that was a big one.
Mm.
That was true to form of this forum here about light bulb moments, and I have a whole set of my own light bulb moments. I've got a couple other things here, then we'll wrap up here. I remember reading somewhere, and I don't know who the thought leader was behind this, but it was just something that really stuck with me about the subject of happiness. And most of us have some type of an event that we would consider to be happy. And we literally allow it in our consciousness for about a nanosecond. And literally, if you can just prolong that, like to 10 seconds, that one simple habit from nanosecond to 10 seconds allows you to embody it a little more. Now, I have that intellectually. Is it habitual? I've tried to do it habitual. Talk to me about that, that just elongating that moment where you let it sink in, you allow 10 seconds to permeate through you. Won't that alone create greater happiness?
Yeah, I'd absolutely think it would. And there isn't a lot of work on this kind of an activity, or in an experiment it would be an intervention, as far as I know, that looks at it. There's a lot of work on gratitude. This is different from that. This is literally kind of using your imagination to revisit a memory of something that was pleasant and positive and kind of soaking in it. And this is a thought that's occurring to me right now. I don't know what your thoughts are on this that I'm about to say, but it seems like the younger generation is probably doing that even less than previous generations were, just because, there's lots of reasons that I can think for it. But, one of the things that in our generation, Tom, would be that we would take photographs, wait for the photographs to be developed at Walmart or something, and then, you know, kind of like see those photographs after maybe even a month after a vacation has passed or an event, and then, savor those, revisit those memories and so on. Nowadays, people just take so many photographs on their phones and everything. It's cheap, and I wonder if anybody actually goes back and looks at those photographs. This would be a very specific instantiation of this idea that, how much time do you spend looking at and recalling and revisiting past positive memories, right? Yeah, so I agree. One last thing that I would say here is that one exercise that I do, and I call it just savoring. I don't have a better word for it, but when I wake up in the morning before I get out of bed, I just like think about everything that's coming up in my day, right? And I have like a list of things to do on my phone, on my calendar that I look at the previous night before I go to sleep, which by the way might seem like the unhappy thing to do or not a happiness thing to do, but it turns out it's actually at least it calms people down. Because the uncertainty of what's coming up the next day is more happiness killing than is knowing that there's a bunch of things that you don't like that are coming up, but at least you have clarity on what it is that you're dealing with the next day. Okay, just as an aside. But anyway, so I have some idea what's coming up. And some of the things, maybe they're not on my list of things to do, but some of those things, like, just the fact that I'm going to have a coffee, right, before I head out, or the fact that I have the weather's going to be good and there's a bit of a walk from my office to my lunch place. So I just kind of like think about the things that I really enjoy. And of course, if there is like today, I'm going to meet my son, I literally, after this is over, I'm going to go over to a restaurant and hang out with my son for about an hour. He goes to UT too. And so these are events that I know I'm really going to enjoy. I'm looking forward to them, and I kind of savor them in my imagination, in my mind, before I even get out of bed, just to set the tone for the day. So it's along the lines of what you're just saying, which is kind of really soak in at a sensory level using your imagination on all the positive things that have either happened in the past or, in my example, things that are coming up in the day.
I so relate with that, and I love the word savoring.
Yeah.
Savoring. I mean, that word alone is just, I wrote that down as another light bulb moment, but I've actually done what you're talking about here.
Ah.
And this whole idea, and it was really a lot of mental angst over this. Before going to bed, do I look at my calendar? Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to just push my phone away before
Mhm.
bed.
Mhm.
And that time before you go to sleep is so important.
Yep.
But I've had this practice of looking at my next day's schedule,
Mhm.
and it does a lot of what you're suggesting. What it does is it actually allows me to look forward to the next day,
Mhm.
as opposed to waking up in the morning, looking at my schedule, and say, oh yeah.
Mhm.
So it was counterintuitive to me that looking at
Mhm.
my calendar for the next day would be a negative experience. No, it's turned out to be a great positive experience, because what I'm able to do is before I go to sleep, I'm able to sort of lead myself before I go into slumber, thinking of, wow, tomorrow I get to talk with this guy, Raj, who we tried to have as a guest at Lightbulb Moments 2024, but he was booked. But we
Mhm.
have him this year, and I get to talk to this guy. So, anyway, it may be a great way to wrap up our conversation. I'm so thrilled that you're able to be part of our event. And I'm super curious about whatever direction we go. I think we're probably going to lead towards the team and that simulation. I think
Sounds
that's
good.
our group. And one of the things that I so love about the work that you do and the other professors that we've had part of our Phil event is they have these really great activities. And and I don't know if you know this, but our theme this year is play.
Oh.
And part of it was just remembering last year, for example, Galen Paulson did a great activity that was a simulation, and it really opened up this mind that simulations and gamification really imprints a whole nother way of learning, and it's very much in spirit of our concept of fill your bucket by getting away and then also fill the gaps in your business. So we are going to have a great time together, Raj. I so enjoyed this conversation. For those of you that are listening, why don't you give Raj a virtual round of applause, put a little note in the chat. We will post this episode ASAP because we want everybody to see it. So thanks again for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, Tom. I really enjoyed my conversation with you as well. You're a wonderful host, and I don't know, you just carry a good vibe about you. So I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person in about a month, right? No, more than a month away. But yeah, looking
All
forward to it.
right. Very good. So for listeners, thanks so much for joining us today. Put a note in the comment, give him a virtual round of applause. Check out the book and get excited about the fill because we're excited. And I have got to be sitting in this workshop. So I am going to be sitting there, participate in your simulation as a student and practitioner. So thanks again for joining us, everybody. Thanks again, Raj, and we'll see all of you very soon.